a little bit more wet than is ideal, but I'm going to show everyone how they can build with slabs that feel slightly before leather hard. I'm going to show you how to also make slab. So who's made a slab? I guess when you were slab building, how did you make the slab?
I did the thing that you showed, the flapping thing.
The throwing it? Okay.
And I did some slabs sort of in that, because we sort of halfway through sort of shifted.
Did that like slab coil building? Yeah. So I'm not really going to show anyone how to use the slab roller. If you're like dead set on using a slab roller, I will show you how. And before you use it, you should have myself or Tommy, someone show you how to use it. It's not a particularly difficult tool to use, but it is like tensioned in a certain way, and if it gets off tension, it's a real pain to fix. So I'm going to show you how to roll a slab out and how to do also what's called throwing a slab. Yeah, the slab flapping. Slab flapping. Which is how I made this one. Personally, in my own work, I almost never use the slab roller, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It's just that I sort of prefer a little bit of struggle and a little bit of unknown kind of throughout the process that I have to contend with, and that's just a rule that I have for myself. So that's part of the reason that I don't use a slab roller. Also, unless you're making a ton of slabs, like gonna make tiles, sometimes I feel like that takes longer than just doing it right here. But the only reason I'm wedging my clay is because I have some hard bits in here, there's trimmings and all sorts of stuff. Your clay right out of your bag, you won't need this as much. The air doesn't matter, it's fine if there's air in there. I'm just wedging it to homogenize it. And then what I'm going to do is always start from the middle, just like with the coils, and just start pushing out. Right. Out to both sides. If this is hurting your hand, you can use a paddle or mallet. Again, I think I showed this already. It usually sticks. It's not doing it so much right now, but eventually the wood will get saturated and start to stick. So you usually need some kind of release, but the big thing with slabs, just like with when you started your coil piece, again, is that compression. Clay doesn't really want to be big and flat. It wants to move, it wants to shrink in different ways, it wants to crack. So compression is really, really key. That's what I'm doing right now. And then what's our other big rule? We have compression. We also want it to be even. Yeah, less important is thin or thick, but we want it to be even. So for our project, we want to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, similar to what you're hand building at. So I'm close here, and it's pretty even. To make this bigger, I can do a couple of different things. One thing I can do is take a rolling pin. This is a giant one, it's just what I could reach. And start to roll it out to the ends. Now whenever you do this, what you don't want to do is roll over the edge like that, right? Because I just made this thin spot that I'm going to have to cut off anyways. So I'm rolling and lifting up. And the other thing you want to do is be sure you rotate your piece around that you're working on. And I could keep doing that, so I rotated it 90 degrees. It's not a bad idea to rotate and flip it. So that was 180 degrees. Right, and keep going towards the edges and thinning it out that way. And that works really well. The other thing you can do is throwing the slab, which is where you pick it up, you pull it back towards yourself with the back of it hitting first so that it slows down and the momentum stretches it. And I'm just going to keep going with this one. And you can see when I'm picking it up, I'm also rotating it. Right? What I'm doing is rotating and flipping it 90 degrees each time. And you can make things really thin this way. So I'm going to cut this off because it's just going to tear But I just want to show you how thin. It's so efficient. I've made big slabs this way. So that was a really small amount of clay. And this is too thin to build with, but I just wanted to show everyone how you can really stretch it out. So this is thinner than you really want it. This would work, but something like this thickness is closer. So it's about double, closer to 1/4 of an inch, this bottom one. So we're really looking for. And then once you've made your slab, the next thing that you do is let them dry. So you want to let them get to leather hard. So for today, what you should do is come up with a little bit of a plan for the shape that you want to build for your base, and then throw your slabs out, make your slabs, and we'll put them on your shelves, and then probably next time you'll be able to build with it. So it's sort of front loaded with the work, but then that means next time when you come to class, you'll be able just to build right through it. And if not Wednesday, then on the following Monday, it'll be fine to go. So we're wanting them to be leather hard, which is like whenever you're trimming, the same stage as trimming. Okay. The other thing that you're not allowed to have, unless you convince me otherwise, is the canvas texture. Okay, so after I've made my slab, I always take a rib. This also helps compress. I'm compressing the surface. This right here was where the slab folded a little bit, or where the cloth that it was on folded. We want to try and avoid that as much as possible. I'm going to go ahead and spend a few seconds compressing it. That's just a weak spot. It's thinner than the rest of the slab. It's more likely to crack there. So you can see it doesn't take long to get this smooth. It's pretty quick. And if I know I'm going to make, let's say I'm going to make a little cube, the best thing to do is to make more slabs than you need, because it really is a bummer to make your slabs, wait 48 hours and start to build and realize you don't have enough, and you have to wait another 48 hours. So I like to make more slabs than I need, and I'm going to show you here, I like to build things, rather than cutting them exact, I build them larger than I need and cut it to size, okay? Which some of you have done in different portions of this current assignment. So I have my slab, I'll cut off a little bit so everyone can feel. I threw this outside, and so you can see the edges are actually a little bit drier than the middle, which is the issue with trying to dry things quickly outside. But if you're careful, and depending on your shape, sometimes you need slabs that are somewhat flexible, okay? If I was just building a cube, they could be super rigid, and that would be totally fine. But say you wanted to build like the cylinder that we looked at a second ago. Right, that was 2 circles, one on top, one on the bottom, but the slab that was in the middle was more flexible than the slabs that were on the top and bottom, so that it could curve without cracking. Does that make sense? So if you have any curves, your slab needs to be a little bit more wet. Y'all, is it okay to get it set back there? And then we'll jump back there in a second. So, for example, if I wanted to make a circle, or I had a curved edge on my piece, this is actually a really good wetness to do it, because I can curve it without it cracking. Whereas if it's drier, it wants to do this, where it's drier at the edge. So it depends a little bit on your shape, what you're after. But what I'm gonna do is make a cube, a cubish thing. I used to require for this assignment that you had to have one either obtuse or acute angle. I'm not requiring it this time, but it's not a bad idea. It can make the form a little bit more interesting. So I'm rough cutting to size. I'm going to take this piece and lay it on top. And use it to also roughen the other shape. So I have 2 that are, oh, I got them a little off, so let's, maybe not, they're actually very close. So I'll use that. what I'm not gonna do right now is worry about this being too big. So I'm gonna take this, let's see. What I'm gonna do is put these two triangles here and then cap the front so I get an angle. And rather than trying to make this the exact distance between those two things, like I said earlier, I'm gonna give myself a mark and then cut it a little bit bigger. From here, it's just slipping and scoring. My scoring tool has made it out into the studio somewhere and not come back, so some of you already have. You have your own, I think. But it's obviously much faster than what I'm doing. Whenever you make slip on the edge or something like this, we don't want to drench it in water, right? You want it to remain that leather hard that you've waited so long to get it to. So I'm just like selectively applying water. And if you're unsure of where to score, what you can do, sometimes is score one piece, set it down, and then get a print so that you have an idea of the distance that you need to score. And the other thing that I'm gonna do is depends on what I'm building. I know that right now, if I just put these two triangle pieces up, they're gonna wanna fall, right? Because if my clay was stiffer, I wouldn't worry about it as much, but the clay's a little bit wet. So what I'm doing is preparing the pieces so I can put them all together. Because I know it'll be much stronger once I get that face on. What are some shapes that y'all are interested in building? I know there hasn't been much time to think about it, but I'm just curious. Triangle, like a cone, or like a pyramid. Pyramid could be cool. And your objects don't necessarily have to go on top. Like you can kind of invert that relationship between base and objects. So you could make a base and then have the objects go underneath. So that'll stay okay-ish until I start knocking it around. I'm gonna look here. So it's about right here. Now, if these pieces were more dry, like if they were hard leather hard, I would be scoring them a little bit more. Or at least would be adding more slip.
There is no water here.
And, thank you. But because they're wet, it's not as necessary. So I'm gonna go onto the front. You said you slab built. Who else was slab built? Did you do like the welding or put coils on the inside?
Mm-hmm.
You did? Yeah, so oftentimes this is taught so that after you've put pieces together, and I'll show everyone the inside here. I just pulled it apart there. You do what's called a weld, which is then come back and score the inside corners and roll a little coil of clay. Put it inside and compress this way. And that's completely fine to do. If your timing is okay, I don't find it that necessary. But if you're feeling worried or you're feeling like maybe your pieces are drier, all of a sudden you came back and they're like more dry than you were expecting or them staying together, it's not a bad idea to do that. So I'm gonna cut right here. Up. It's going to be the same thing. Now remember, your piece is to be 10 inches in one direction. It doesn't mean that the base doesn't have to be, it can be, but it doesn't have to be 10 inches. You could stack pieces on top of each other so that you hit that 10-inch parameter. What I'm really looking for, and what you're going to be looking for too when you do this, is that when you put two pieces together, you want just a little bit of slip to get squished out of the edge. That's usually a good sign that you're going to have a good attachment. So I'm a little high here. I'm going to give myself, this is a straight line. This blade is straight. So I'm giving myself a pretty good mark, knowing that I'm pretty close to being straight. And I'm going to connect the two on the back. So they have a pretty flat top. No, that's okay. It sounded like a recording or something. I like that. So I'm going to use that one more time to get a print so that I have an idea of where I need to actually score. Pop it back on top, and I'm trying to compress against my edge. Okay, so we have a closed form. What I can do now, and I find this to be so much easier, is to come back and start to cut things flush, rather than.
Question.
Uh-huh.
If I want to create the roof not flat, like you made by two pieces with corner, how I will make a stamp to scorch?
If you wanna.
So how to make it the same on both sides?
Like a roof like this? Yeah. Well, I think I would make it bigger and then cut it down. But you can also build things, you could build something out of cardboard first and put it together and see if it's fitting correctly. And then you could take it back apart and then just use that as a template to cut your slabs out. Does that make sense? So you could.
Yes, okay, we create the roof, we create the wall, we put roof to wall, and we have to create stamp to see where we have to scorch.
Well, if you're just doing it here, you just score the ends. Like where they meet.
But on the bottom side?
Yeah.
Where roof attached to the wall?
Yeah. I think what I would do is I'd put two slabs together like this first, and then have your cube for the house. And then when they have had a little bit of time to dry, pick it up. I would score the cube, pick it up, set it down.
It will be enough if the clay is wet.
Yeah, as long as it's had a little bit of time, you should be able to move it around. So now that I've cut everything close to size, I'm going to come back in the same way and work reductively to make things really flush. Rather than, it's just from experience where I've tried to make things and cut everything the exact size and put it together, and I cut something a little bit short, or my hand wavers, and all of a sudden you can no longer make it fit in the same way. So I really do find that making things bigger and then coming back to fix your edges So if you want your piece to be really, really tight, then you want to work with stiffer clay. If it's okay if there's some movement, it can be a little bit more wet. Obviously, if I push too hard right now, right, it's going to change its shape. So that's something you need to be aware of. This top, you see how it's not straight right here. I could still come back and use this knife to remove more material. And then I would finish with this tool to do any small, sort of more nuanced work. I also like to, where the attachment points are, I'm using the back of this knife. This works completely fine, but a piece of wood works too. This is just a way of helping compress all of those joints together. Or if I'm doing the bottom, I'll let gravity do some of that. But clay, and maybe some of you have realized this at some point, but, and maybe Peyton said this, I can't remember, I heard a demo, but people often say clay has a memory, and it kind of does. You can work really, really hard to get this, right? You can't see a joint here anymore, or it's this side. There's no joint visible, but sometimes when it gets all the way through the fire, there'll be a slight ghosting of it. So whenever what kind of joints did I use when I made this? Just butt joints, just regular old, stuck them together, butt joints. And I'm running the risk here of the joints showing in the end. But I'm gonna show you a miter joint. And the miter joint, where you make the two angled cuts, is a lot less likely to show up in the shift. Yeah. It's a little bit harder to do with wet clay. But everyone can see in the same way, made it rough first. Now I'm starting to refine it and make it smoother. If I wanted this to be really smooth, what I would do is get it pretty close to where it's at right now, and then I'd let it hang out for 24 hours under plastic, and then come back when it's stiffer and move to my soft rib. The same process as you're doing on your other pieces. And you can get things to have really sharp, nice edges. If you want a really sharp edge, what I do is I'll get it to be as sharp as I can, like this, while it's wet, and then I'll let it get hard, leather hard, so towards the end of leather hard, and I'll just take my hand and quiet it down like that. That small bevel, that small bull nose it's the same principle as when we're putting a shadow underneath our pieces, rounding that edge over. It's also less likely to chip. And when you just look at most things made in the world, the edges are broke. So people say to break the edge, or they're called roundovers or a bull nose. Even like the edges of all of our tables are just slightly round rather than a really sharp edge. Because by the time you put glaze on there too, it'll be super sharp. So from here, you have your slab base. You could press mold objects and stack them, and this is already 10 inches, right? Or put your still life on top of here and have some objects falling off. So that's the kind of primitive, that's the base of the project. Real quickly, I'll show you a miter joint. And I'm not super good at cutting 45 degree. Do you have that little 45 degree tool? Mm-hmm. Do you have one? Can we see really quick? I don't own one of these, but maybe some people have one. I don't think that we have one in our community toolkit. But there are tools that cut 45 degree angles for you. Next class, what I'll do is give you a press molding demo, how to put clay into a plaster mold and get a positive out is what it's called. So they make these, I don't know what they're called, angle cutting tools. They have a limit, this one's okay. If your slab is too thin, it's really hard to make any substantial cut here, but they have two different angles. I mean, this is 45 degree angle. I don't know what that is. Would that also be 45 degree angle? It's not, right? Yeah. I can't remember my geometry very well. It's not a 45 degree angle though. So the way these work is you just put it right up against. Right, I'm getting a really nice consistent cut that way. Now, if you don't support the material from the back, whenever you cut through it, you're likely to get what's called tear out. And it didn't do it very badly here, but it tore just the very end. And sometimes it's much worse than that. And it's the same when you're working with wood. This would be called a tear out at the end. So what you can do is cut through. To avoid that, you just support the back of it. And the reason it's tearing out is because there is no support at the end, and it's ripping. So by doing that, you can get a cleaner finished edge. But this would be the same thing. Now I would just score. And they'd be able to push these two things together. Okay. I would still come back and clean it up with a combination of the serrated rib and a smoother rib. And then I would do the same thing. I would quiet that edge a little bit, but you're a lot less likely to see the joints, whereas with the butt joint, they can show up. So you can also make things this way. If you don't have this tool, the truth is it doesn't have to be an exact 45-degree angle because we're working with clay, and it's somewhat valuable. How would I do this? I think I'd find a way, I would just try and stay really consistent, pressure-wise, and supporting at the end. Pull through. And you can see my cut's not the exact same. If anything, you want to overshoot it so that you have a steeper angle, like a 65-degree angle, rather than a 45-degree angle. There's going to be a bunch of stuff in the middle, exactly, and it gives you a little lee room whenever because we're really only looking at the outside, and we want it to structurally stay together. But you can see I just cut that with a knife, and it's fine, and I would squish it together, same thing, come back, clean it up, and you get a really clean angle that way too. Okay. So, does anyone have questions about those working methods? Butt joints, make things bigger, cut them down to size, don't try and get them right at the beginning. If you're worried about the seams showing, or say you want it to be really, really clean, you can also use the miter joints, which is the 45-degree angle joints. Okay? Any questions? Okay, so make your slabs today, and then we can start building next time. Okay.